Can you step aside a bit to the chest? I think it's this. Let me know if this looks good to people of live stream. I think it works. Yeah, I'm going to turn the brightness down. Great.
Or like leave it. Sorry.
Yeah. Sorry?
Do we leave it here or?
Yeah.
Okay.
I can sit with it though. Or should I just leave it? I think leave it. Huh?
Yeah.
Oh, will I sit with it? Is that what it is?
Will you guys make sure no one feels this? Okay. Thank you.
That's all right.
I'm very obsessed with your tattoos.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. That's so fun. I didn't have any tattoos a few years ago, and then now I have so many.
I feel you.
It happens. Yeah.
You get one and suddenly it's like, oh, I need so many
Not
little
bad.
doodles.
I can do it. Yeah. Well, thank you. That's such a cool place.
I've never been here, and I'm like,
Yeah.
whoa.
Yeah, it used to be a fancy place they literally turned the possible dreams around. Or like trams. We have one in the UK called Roundhouse, and they used to like drive it in and then like wheel it all the way around and then put it out.
So that's like built-in U-turn kind of way.
Before they could like turn.
Before they can just.
Before they could turn. I'm like paranoid. Hello, people in the chat. Everything is fine. Great thumbnail. Yeah, I'm aware that we're live. I'm just making sure that we're set up in time. Okay, I'm going to leave you now. Goodbye.
Where are you from in the UK?
Yeah, I'm from London.
Oh, fun. I was just there.
Were you?
Yeah.
What were you there for? Just
I'm a little nerd who got their MFA in classical acting and Shakespearean studies.
Where did you go? Oh, at the Globe?
Yeah, I'm visiting the Globe. I got my master's in here at the Shakespeare Theatre Company, and it was like 1 year straight through absolute hell. But I made my best friend there, and she just turned 30, and so we went over there for like a week and a half, and saw Simply in the Globe, and saw Jonathan Bailey as Richard II.
I'm seeing that on the 31st. I'm so excited.
I'm so excited.
I'm so excited. And I think the last one I saw that the second was with David Tennant. So I feel very happy.
Oh, I'm so envious. It was one of the main reasons why we went.
Yeah, I love it.
We just work. It's all the much to do.
I've been hearing so much wonderful things about it. How did you find it?
I was really upset because it wasn't perfect production of Much Ado.
Yeah, because that's kind of how I feel about it. I'm getting the book that maybe people who don't know, I don't know. Yeah, it's great. It's so amazing, and that's super productive. So I'm like, would I be snobby? Probably not.
You know, if you are very familiar with Much Ado, my only gripe is that it had Dogberry completely, which is fascinating. It was a big choice. But it worked with the cut that they were doing, and it was my favorite version of the folding scenes I've ever seen done.
It's like a limited one.
Yeah.
I'm going to try and get it.
You know.
I went to Alexa with Bruno. I love Bruno.
Really?
Yeah, I really didn't like production. It didn't make any sense. It was like a punk rock lecture. There wasn't actually anything that punk rock about it.
And in London, of all places, where like punk was really.
And she's great. She's tremendous. And Dr. Charlie was in it. She's great. But like, it just didn't work for me. And it was like horrendously expensive. And a 75-minute show. And I was just like,
75?
straight through, yeah.
I saw Oedipus over at there.
Which one was it? There was Rami Malek and there was
The Radio Malek.
yeah.
Which was also really. I didn't know how I felt about it. We're like, I really liked it, and then I was also like, we're digging ourselves a lot here. Like, we like what we're doing more than I think the audience does.
Showing how like attractive I'm not, and here's like a 5 and it's that. I don't know if it's going to make it in, but it was very important to me. They're in here. They can also, they probably hear everything I'm saying. Yeah. Untapped Tech Girls on it. As usual. Yeah, I hope you're all enjoying my opinions about theatre.
Oh my gosh. Wow, they're hearing everything we're seeing or we're saying.
Don't worry, I will adjust the angle as needed. I'm just catching up. Thank you, but I think it will be good. It's like, it's a bit low, but it's I like that it's not distracting anyone.
And then the next day went to another meeting, which you would think I find unbearable, but actually I loved it because I love being able to.
Everyone's like, what is this? Okay.
For me, being able to see these folks.
I wish you could
a little bit like how my daughter can feel about seeing both Olivia Rodrigo and Taylor Swift in the same night. And after it's sort of like, hey, do you want to go out to dinner? And I was like, yes.
On the chat, yeah.
Yeah. And relaxed and normal person.
I love it. Maybe I need to clean the.
Now I have a
How do I do this?
United Nations luxuriating in my anxiety. As I walked, I thought about whether I had a chance to speak and would say what an honor it is to represent not just my criteria and partners in health, but also people who survive TB and those.
You're about to get
So I
clean.
made it to the grounds of the New York, this phenomenal, beautiful landscape, and some of the people on which my business is known as a metaphor. And then I got inside where everything was, for lack of a better term, extraordinarily united patients. This is cool. Like the piece that has been translated and representatives
I'm Lucy, by the way.
Rosianna, so nice to meet you.
Now, the declaration includes great targets for reducing TB.
Okay, that's a bit better.
Which get honored with safe emergence of lives.
I
Of course,
also
it's only
assume
a
that
piece
the,
of
like,
paper,
being
and
liked
most
on the
nations
screen
have
is not
no
helping.
reason.
It's not helping, but that's okay. I'm just going to catch up, make sure I didn't miss anything.
I was thinking about how at the last one in 2018, Shreya Tripathi was still alive. Shreya was a teenager who sued
Did
her
you
own
ever do
government
Mama
in India
UN
to secure access to the life-saving
It's really
medication for
funny how it
for
looks
herself
exactly like
and others. And she was also appointed on book for Fault in Our Stars. Her fight took her to India's highest court, where she eventually
I
won.
did it once in 8th
But
grade.
then it
I
was too
think I
late
was
for
South
her.
Korea,
Her wrongs were
which
simply
is
too
a
damaged for her
hilarious
to survive. And so, in the end, her death was caused not just by tuberculosis, but also by government bureaucracy and international indifference to TB. And so I was thinking about Shreya as the young people told me that actually I would have a chance to speak as long as I kept it under 2 minutes. I wish I'd said more, that this is a problem of resource allocation, that disease does not treat people equally,
Thank
and
you.
society treats people equally, that we cannot go on promising to address this crisis without making the choices and sacrifices necessary
So are you
to enact
doing
the
anything with a play at the moment?
But
Are you
here's what I would say. I want
Are
to
you
begin
doing
by
any
saying that
Shakespearean
23
things
years
at the
ago,
moment?
Dr.
Yes,
Peter
and
Eugenie,
Yes,
and very
I
much
wrote
like this
the
one,
Folger Shakespeare
said of
Library.
HIV
Oh, wow,
medications,
that sounds
where are
great.
the drugs?
Yeah,
The drugs are where the disease is not, and where is the disease? The disease is where the drugs are not. And that is the situation we are in today with tuberculosis. The cure is where the disease is not, and the disease is where the cure is not. We have had a disease that is curable for 75 years that continues to kill 1.6 million people. And maybe it was possible to say in the 19th century that the death from tuberculosis was caused by a bacterium called tuberculosis, but we can really no longer say that. Today we have to accept the reality that since we know how to kill that bacteria, we know how to cure this disease. Today we have to accept the reality that death from tuberculosis is
you put
caused
your
by
email address
human-built
and
systems,
I'll email
by human choice. We have chosen the world that we share today, and we can choose a better world. We are currently choosing a world where 1.6 million people die of tuberculosis, and I believe that with your help together, working over the next decade, we will choose a world where no one dies of tuberculosis.
Allows charities to post like specific projects, and then we give follow-ups to donors so that donors can see exactly how their money was spent.
Muchas gracias.
And so I feel like it kind of aligns a lot with
I
John
hope I
does,
did
but I
okay.
also have a separate
And I
like
hope that showing
nonprofit,
somehow
like again, that
knows
is
that we are still
about
fighting for her.
yes.
We will continue
And
to
so
do so until the
yeah, I
final
just feel
stage.
really like personally motivated and engaged, and so I just don't know if there's like any sort of, you know,
Have you sent an email?
There is one reason
we'll be in
because
touch.
And
Okay. I know, I have a feeling like he wouldn't post it. Yeah, and even if it's on a volunteer basis, because like the foundation, I just put in that work on my own, so I'm totally fine with like with volunteer work. Like I'm just want to be engaged in any way possible. But yeah, I really appreciate you listening. I'm sorry if it's like on phone breaks. I know you're working right now, but it was so nice to meet you. I've been a fan for like so long. I'm sure you hear that all the time, like of both of you. So I feel like you're just, yeah, you guys are like amazing. Everything that you guys do is amazing. I've watched Project for Awesome religiously for like 10 years, so I always see you on like the early morning shift, the self-care bunny, everything. So yeah.
I just found a great card this morning of a bunny with a bagel, and I was like,
the direction
it was like at the bookstore that's doing the books for this event. It's so great. We had all these little plastic bunnies holding bagels.
Oh my gosh, that's so cute. I wasn't expecting to see
It
you
all
from the
depends
UK to help
Just
with
for the
the.
first year. And I
every
got
week.
Oh really? Okay.
You know,
Things been going well.
very well.
Okay, I'm sure.
I mean,
I
it's
don't know if
like
you're
a
like.
horrendous environment.
to access water.
Yeah, I don't know if you're like exhausted because of
You
the.
take a
Or
deep
you're
breath
just used to it.
towards this, you know,
Yeah, I'm sure
you can
there's a lot
see
of
different
adrenaline. But
business,
yeah, it was really nice talking to you. I'm so
individual
sorry for taking
activism.
your time. I know you're working. Thank you so much.
I'm gonna send her this. Oh, I think it's about to start.
It's about to stop. Everyone be cool.
Hello, good evening. I am not John Green, but I'm very happy to see all of you here. My name is Laurie Gilman. I'm the owner of East City Bookshop. That's great. Well, you probably know we're on Capitol Hill. And as I said, I'm really happy that you all came out tonight for this discussion of John's new book, Everything is Tuberculosis. I think this is going to be a book that will shift your framework for your worldview. It really is something. Before we get started, this will be very short, I promise. I want to thank our venue partners at Capital Turnaround and Union Stage. They've been a pleasure to work with. and it's been so easy to make this event happen. I also want to thank all of you for supporting a small, local, woman-owned business. I probably don't have to tell this crowd this, but where you spend your money makes a difference. If anyone here hasn't yet been to the East City Bookshop, please come see us. We are very close to here, just a few blocks away. You can come chat with us about books, join one of our 14 book clubs, come to some of our in-person events at the shop. We've always got something going on. You can also find us on all the social media, and you can see what's coming up and shop on our website, eastcitybookshop.com. All right, that is all that I have to say. So thank you again for coming, and without further ado, John Green.
Hi, everybody. Hi. Oh, wow, it's so great to be with you. Thank you so much. I'm trying to make a complicated phone call right now to see her, you know. It's always hit and miss. You got, depending on our internet and their internet, a lot has to go right. But in the meantime, I just want to say a huge thanks to the bookstore for making tonight possible. Also, this beautiful venue. What a joy to be in this trolley car turnaround space, converted into a beautiful theater. And what a gift to me. And I hope that you have a wonderful night tonight. I'm going to read a little bit of the book just so that you can plausibly say you attended a book reading. But before I do, I want to thank you for doing the heroic work of getting out of bed and making yourself go outside and all that stuff. It's not easy, especially right now, at least for many of us, and yet here we are finding ways to go on and perhaps finding meaning and community along the way. That's what I hope tonight will be for you, an opportunity to reflect in community on what we have, the world we have built and the worlds we might build instead. All right, I'm going to read from this book while I'm waiting for Henry. We'll see if he's available, but I'll just tell you what he would say. Please subscribe to Henry's YouTube channel. He's a good YouTuber. He never forgets to say, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. So check out Henry's YouTube channel. You can just Google Henry Writer YouTube and find his YouTube channel there. But yeah, it's a great YouTube channel and a chance to hear directly from somebody in Sierra Leone who's been through the experiences he's been through. And if you read the book and care about Henry as I do, you'll love following him on YouTube. I'm going to read the book, but I just realized in this moment that I do not have a copy of it. And so I'm going to ask this kind person. What a relief that there happen to be 850 copies of the book here for me to read. All right, so this is about the first time I went to the government hospital when I knew nothing about tuberculosis. At the time, I didn't even know tuberculosis was still a thing, let alone that there were hospitals in Sierra Leone devoted to it. When we arrived at LaCa, we were immediately greeted by a child who introduced himself as Henry. That's my son's name, I told him, and he smiled. Most Sierra Leoneans are multilingual, but Henry spoke particularly good English, especially for a kid his age, which made it possible for us to have a conversation that could go beyond my few halting phrases of Creole. I asked him how he was doing, and he said, "I'm happy, sir. I am encouraged." He loved that word, and who wouldn't? Encouraged, like courage is something we rouse ourselves and others into. My son Henry was 9 then, and this Henry looked about the same age, a small boy with spindly legs and a big goofy smile. He wore shorts and an oversized rugby shirt that reached nearly to his knees. Henry took hold of my t-shirt and began walking me around the hospital. He showed me the lab where a technician was looking through a microscope. Henry looked into the microscope and then asked me to, as the lab tech, a young woman from Freetown, explained that this sample contained tuberculosis, even though the patient had been treated for several months with standard therapy. This lab tech started to explain standard therapy to me, but Henry was pulling on my shirt again. He walked me through the wards, a complex of poorly ventilated buildings that contained hospital rooms with barred windows, thin mattresses, and no toilets. There was no electricity in the wards and no consistent running water. To me, the rooms resembled prison cells. Before it was a TB hospital, Lacan was a leprosy isolation facility, and it felt like one. Inside each room, one or two patients lay on cots, generally on their side or back. A few sat on the edges of their beds, leaning forward. And all of these men, the women were in a separate ward, were thin. Some were so emaciated that their skin seemed wrapped tightly around bone. As we walked down a hallway between buildings, Henry and I watched a young man. Hold on a second. He says, "Hello, Dad, I'm here." See if we can make it happen. As I walked, Henry eventually brought me back to the group of doctors and nurses who were meeting in a small room near the entrance of the hospital. And then one of the nurses lovingly and laughingly shooed him away. Here he is! It's Henry, everybody!
I'm encouraging you guys to read the book because we need to motivate people out there. Yes, my story will inspire people out there and build their confidence. I really love you guys. Please make sure you help me achieve my goal, which is 100,000 subscribers on my YouTube channel. Guys, bye.
Thank you so much, Henry. Thank you. It's good to see you. Good night. Henry Ryder, everybody. Who is that kid? I asked. The kid I just talked to. Henry, answered the nurse. The sweetest boy. He's one of the patients we're worried about, said a physician who went by Dr. Michael. He's a patient? I asked. Yeah. He's such a cute little kid. I hope he's going to be okay. Dr. Michael told me that Henry wasn't a little boy. He was 17. He was only so small because he'd grown up malnourished, and then TB had further emaciated his body. He seems to be doing okay, I said. Lots of energy. He walked me all around the hospital. This is because the antibiotics are working, Dr. Michael explained. But we know they are not working well enough. We are almost certain they will fail, and that is a big problem. He shrugged, tight-lipped. There was a lot I didn't understand. Thank you. Here's your book. It is now my distinct pleasure and honor to welcome to the stage Dr. Atul Gawande. I know. I know. You know Dr. Gawande. Staff writer for The New Yorker, author of one of my all-time favorite books, Being Mortal. I love a book that talks about death, Atul. And you wrote one of my favorites.
We could go on at length about death together.
Oh my gosh, yeah. It's a mutual area of interest for us.
It really is. but we're going to talk about life.
Great, I love that. That's beautiful.
Because all stories of dying are stories about life.
Absolutely.
You took on a disease that has no champion, except the people who get it. TB is a disease of the forgotten, the destitute, the people who are fleeing war, the people who are in prison, people who are in some of the toughest slums in the world. And then suddenly TB can be in your neighbor in the most unexpected populations. Henry is the reason you ended up becoming interested in TB. Can you say more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you hear that 1.25 million people die of the disease, or you hear that 10 million people get sick every year, and those numbers, they don't process for me. I can't imagine 1.25 million. I don't know what that number means. But I think when I met Henry and I saw what this disease looked like in one human life is really when I realized the scope of the crisis. It's easier to multiply 1.25 million by 1 than it is to multiply 1.25 million by 0, right? And so when I got to know Henry and came to hear his story and hear his mom's story and what they went through, so much of which was needless, what they went through needlessly, it really moved me. And I've been writing about tuberculosis anyway because I'm fascinated by infectious disease, and because to me tuberculosis is kind of, as you said, the exemplary disease of injustice, a disease that follows the paths of injustice that we blaze for it. But it was really in meeting Henry and coming to understand his story that I realized that what I was writing was a book, and that I wanted to write a book about this, even though I knew it was going to be like a bit of a departure. But I'm incredibly fortunate. Like we booked this room. I remember when we booked this room because my publicist was like, we can fill this room, and I was like, with a book about tuberculosis? I'm not convinced. And boy, was I wrong. So thank you so much for being here.
The book is about Henry, the book is about tuberculosis, but it's also about you. And there's a quiet, I mean, first of all, it is such a good book.
Oh, thank you. That's like if you're, just not to make it awkward for Atul, but it's a little bit like if you're like, Hero was like, I'm proud of you, son.
I learned about TB.
Wow, great, amazing.
So, and you made it personal, and that's what's missing so often. Except you hid yourself a little bit. Something brought you to Sierra Leone in the first place. Can you say a little bit about that? And then you were on the journey with Henry as he is navigating, the wrong treatment. And you were with him along the way, and I didn't get the glimpse of what you went through as you're deciding to accompany him through what became some years of uncertainty about whether you would survive.
Yeah, I mean, Henry was essentially on his deathbed when he finally got access to the treatment, that the personalized, tailored treatment that you or I would expect and that everyone deserves. And so he had to endure unimaginable suffering. He lost hearing in one ear. He was denied the opportunity to go to high school for years. He watched his peers move forward in their education and into university, and he was still in that hospital, dying. And all of that was unnecessary. He could have been, very quickly, in the US, he would have been very quickly diagnosed with the correct form of treatment, the correct form of tuberculosis, and received the appropriate treatment. I was in Sierra Leone in the first place to learn about the maternal healthcare system there. So our community has supported the Kono district's attempts to improve the maternal healthcare system in Kono, including building this, which will have a NICU and plenty of operating rooms to have safe emergency C-sections. And it's really a remarkable place that will finish construction later this year, I just learned, which is super exciting. And so many of you have been a part of that journey, so many thousands of nerd fighters. And by the way, I realize there's some infectious disease doctors in the room who probably are like, what the hell is going on? And I get that, I'm sorry, but don't feel excluded. Feel welcomed into something new and exciting. We need more physicians in Nerd Criteria. We over-index on like librarians, teachers, booksellers. We under-index a little bit on physicians, so we need a doctor or two. So thank you for being here tonight. But yeah, so our community, which is called Nerdfighteria, which I realize is weird. Our community, thousands of people give monthly to Partners in Health to support that work and support not just the building of this hospital, but also the maintenance of it. So that's why we were in Sierra Leone in the first place. That's part of a long-term commitment our family and this community has made to try to address healthcare inequities globally. But yeah, the journey with Henry, you know, it's hard. It's heartbreaking, and the truth is, most kids like Henry die. Henry's roommate died. Most kids like him die.
You are from the Midwest. I'm from Ohio, the poorest county in Ohio, Athens County. And one of the difficulties is expressing why caring for people far away can be as important as caring for people in your own backyard. And I've tried to do both. But at this moment in time where people are pulling up stakes, and our leadership is anyway, and questioning, why are you talking about a child in Sierra Leone? Why are you asking us to care? That's the hardest place that we are at the moment. And how do you think about that? Because you know there is suffering all around you in Indiana. I see it in Ohio. I see it around our neighborhoods here in Washington. And I also care about what's happening in other parts of the world.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. These aren't mutually exclusive. It's not either or. It's both and. And you know, if half a cent of my tax dollar is going to foreign aid, that doesn't inconvenience me. It really doesn't. And I realize I'm preaching to the choir here, but the decisions made, but maybe I'm not entirely preaching to the choir, and the decisions made by the US government, I mean, I think the most recent estimate is that 3.3 million people will die next year as a result of those decisions. That's 3.3 million human lives that we're going to lose unnecessarily. It's absolutely devastating. I've never experienced anything like this, you know, and this is now the theme of my tour and my life, is trying to get people to care about the incredible work that you were doing at USAID. I met this afternoon with folks who've been terminated from USAID and their implementing partners, some of whom I know are here. Thank you for being here, who did amazing work. And I know it's easy to dismiss those folks' works and say this is bureaucracy, this is bureaucrats, this is you know, painting civil servants as something other than public servants. But the truth is, what you know, most of y'all know in this town, and I wish people knew in Indiana, is that those are the people who make the world that we share possible. The year I graduated from college, 2.5 million people died of tuberculosis, and last year 1.25 million did. Now that's in no way acceptable. Nobody should be dying of tuberculosis in the 21st century. And yet, it is nonetheless true that we've made progress. And we made that progress not because it was natural, not because it was inevitable, but because millions of people, hundreds of millions, if you count US taxpayers, worked together to make that progress happen. And without this funding, we are going to see a dramatic regression in the fight against tuberculosis. I think of it as kind of a long staircase. You know, and we started out 200 years ago with absolutely no tools to fight this disease. Hippocrates told his students in the old days not even to try to treat phthisis because it would make them look like bad healers, just to let those people die with no treatment at all. And then we moved up the staircase. We figured out this isn't an inherited disease, it's a contagious one. We moved up the staircase more with public health interventions. We moved up the staircase a little bit with a vaccine that unfortunately is 102 years old and not very good. We moved up the staircase again tremendously with the discovery of antibiotics, with
lots of other public health interventions. And we're moving up the staircase. We're in the process of moving up the staircase now with better diagnostic tools, shorter regimens, shorter preventative care regimens. We were moving up the staircase until 8 weeks ago. When we did not take a step down the staircase, we fell down the damn staircase. We fell so far down the staircase. And it falls to us now to try to pick ourselves up and begin walking up the staircase again.
Can I have some clapping for that? Two things I want to say about it. One is that the point about how little is required to go far. We pay about $12,000 and the average family pays about $12,000 in taxes, and it's $36 that goes towards the foreign assistance programs that we bring around the world. On half the budget of the hospital where I've done surgery across my career, half the budget of that hospital system, we were able to deploy, we did deploy up until 9 weeks ago, care and services that reach hundreds of millions of people and saved lives by the millions. That is an extraordinary accomplishment that America should be proud of. The second thing I want to say is the way I look at this is the staircase has been a journey that we're all on as human beings. We have learned in the last century how to more than double the human lifespan. The top 1% in America lives an average of 90 years. That means between public health and healthcare delivery, if you can access it, we have the ability to make it so the average person is not going to die before 90. But we don't deliver that across the United States and across the world. And our task as our generation is learning how to make that capability feasible, affordable, reliable, and delivered to everybody across the world. And we don't pull up stakes on having that learning and trying together to figure it out. I've learned so much from other countries that I'm excited to be bringing here, and there's so much we're doing that can be brought elsewhere. So you're joining this fight, not just with this book, but over the years, has been amazing to watch. And what you're bringing is an entire community that cares enough to fight for it here at home. And all of you are part of doing that. And I'm just grateful to you, John, and your brother for making all of this possible.
Thanks, Atul.
Tell me about stigma. That's played a really important role in TV. And there's a sentence that I wrote down in your book of many that I wrote down. We all engage in the punitive act of giving a disease a meaning. Can you explain what that means and how damaging stigma is? Even what is it?
Yeah, I mean, so stigma is a mark of disgrace. That's what it means. And often diseases are stigmatized, right? Like I have OCD, that's a stigmatized disease. People find some of the compulsive behaviors associated with some OCD off-putting or concerning, and they stigmatize it as a result. My dad had cancer twice when I was a kid. That was a highly stigmatized disease, especially back then. But even when my brother had cancer, you know, people told him that he got cancer because he took the COVID vaccine, or yeah, it was a pretty easy one to dismiss, fortunately, but it's still hurtful, right? Like telling people that they're responsible for their illness is extremely hurtful because it's difficult enough to live with serious illness without having to live with the stigma associated with it. And many people who've had tuberculosis have told me that living with the disease is hard, but living with the stigma is even harder. They might be abandoned. One young man told me that he was scared to visit town because he was worried about running into anyone from his extended family, all of whom had abandoned him when he got tuberculosis because it was seen as such a mark of disgrace. And that's really, it's a failure of our imagining on some level, because it's a failure of us to imagine disease as it is. We engage in this punitive act of giving a disease a meaning, but of course, disease has no meaning. Like, disease doesn't have a moral compass. Disease doesn't know whether you're a good person or a bad person. Like, the reason I didn't get cancer and Hank did isn't because, like, I lived my life better or made better choices. Like, I assure you, my diet is worse than his, right? And it's not because of that. It's because we don't want to live in a world where humans have no agency. We don't want to live in a world where some people get sick and other people don't, and the reasons for that are either luck or the failures of human-built systems. That's an uncomfortable place for us to be. I was friends with this wonderful young woman who died of cancer in 2022 named Casey Altman, who told me once about the stigma that she'd experienced, that stigma is a way of saying you deserve for this to happen, and inherent within this that is, and I don't deserve for it to happen. And what a horrific thing to say to someone who's already having to live with illness. Illness becomes a kind of double burden when it's stigmatized. And so I think it's really important to grapple with that stigma, but it's also important to understand that the reason stigma exists with a disease like TB is, at least in part, because we've done such a terrible job of getting the cure to the people who need it. Because we know that incurable infectious diseases, or diseases that are perceived as incurable, are more highly stigmatized than, say, a strep throat infection. Nobody says, like, oh, you got, well, maybe they do, but they shouldn't say you got strep throat for being a bad person. But they do say that about tuberculosis, and part of that is because the cure is where the disease is not, and the disease is where the cure is not.
This is an opportunity for me to ask you to explain STP for the infectious disease lesson of the day. We eliminated tuberculosis in the United States and in most of the rich world, and we did it before we had a lot of the modern capabilities we have today. So can you explain the strategy that works?
Yeah, so it has an acronym like frickin' everything in global health. STP. I don't know if your worlds have acronyms for everything, but like in the world of tuberculosis,
We are in Washington.
I guess that's true. And you can just string 3 letters together, put it into Google, and it'll be like, oh, that's a regimen for tuberculosis. STP is the acronym, and it stands for Search, Treat, Prevent. And this is you're exactly right. This is what we did in the United States in the 1950s. We sent out, get this, we sent out big buses that had mobile chest x-ray machines inside of them. In the 1950s, we did this, and we gave people free chest x-rays, free healthcare. And then if they tested positive for TB, we treated their TB for free, because we were like, what a great decision it would be to live in a world without tuberculosis. How much resources would that save? So we'll spend a little bit, but we'll get a lot. Mind-blowing logic. And then the last letter, P, stands for preventative care. So we don't wait until people are so sick they come to the hospital. We search for those cases. We treat every person that we find with an appropriate treatment for their tuberculosis, and then we offer preventative care to their close contacts. And so we have ways with about 1 month of antibiotics to make sure that somebody who's been exposed to TB doesn't become sick, doesn't get an infection. It's called preventative therapy. And if you do that, you end that chain of infection. And yes, it's expensive. I think the UN estimates that it would cost $25 billion a year to eliminate TB globally. But think about all the money we used to spend on TB in the United States. Like when my great uncle died of tuberculosis in 1930, there were still sanatoriums all over the United States with hundreds of thousands, maybe even then 1 million patients. At the height of the TB crisis in the United States, there were almost as many hospital beds for TB patients as there were hospital beds for all other conditions combined. And now we don't spend nearly as much money on tuberculosis because it's not as big of a deal. And that could be the case in the entire world if we made the proper investments.
That process, we may screen, we will then treat the people who are actually sick, but then fail to give prevention to their families, which would shut the tap off. I mean, within months, you can eliminate disease in
Yeah.
entire communities.
They did it in Bethel, Alaska in 1 year. They saw TB go down by 70% in 1 year with a comprehensive STP plan. And that was in the 60s.
One of the things I learned in the book is that one of my heroes, Arthur Conan Doyle, a physician,
Country doctor like yourself. A writer and country doctor just like you.
well, even before he became famous for Sherlock Holmes, I did not know he became famous for a story in TV. Can you tell that story?
Yeah, so Arthur Conan Doyle read a paper in the British, this is an incredible story. Arthur Conan Doyle sitting in his office in like rural England, he reads a supplement of the British Medical Journal that's just come out where Robert Koch, the guy who identified tuberculosis as being an infectious disease, announces that he has discovered a cure for tuberculosis, which is this serum that he calls Koch serum. He was a bit of a narcissist, or it came to be called tuberculin. And Sir Arthur Conan Doyle is so astonished by this paper that he literally stands up out of his office, packs a bag, and goes to Berlin that day to like research. This is the guy who wrote Sherlock Holmes. He leaves his medical practice. I assume he had appointments the next day. Imagine being one of those papers. Oh, sorry, he went to Berlin. He's on the hunt for tuberculin. He goes to Robert Koch's house. The butler sees him, but he never gets to see Robert Koch. And then eventually he starts talking to patients. He starts investigating this tuberculin story. And he's like, this is not a cure for tuberculosis. This is, as he put it, it doesn't kill rats. It picks up rat poop. He actually said droppings, I believe, but I'm paraphrasing. And then he correctly identifies that the substance tuberculin can tell you whether or not you've had a tuberculosis infection. And the reason so many people have really extreme immune responses to it is that so many people have tuberculosis infections. And so he correctly identifies that, which is still what we use tuberculin for today in some cases. Like if you've ever had a skin test where they test you for tuberculosis because you work in a school or you work in a hospital or whatever, like you've had a version of the tuberculin test that Arthur Conan Doyle helped discover. Isn't that mind-blowing? So yeah, that was just, when I found that out, I was like, you're kidding me. It's like a novel.
And am I right? He hadn't even started writing the Sherlock Holmes.
Oh, this was like 10 years before he started writing Sherlock Holmes. But then it really reveals like the kind of personality he was. Like he was clearly writing about a version of himself, like this deducer, you know, this sort of investigator and deducer. And then that reminded me that like ultimately doctors are kind of detectives, which made me like kind of feel that maybe I missed my calling, except I never would have passed organic chemistry.
I'm going to read you a quote that's not from you.
Oh, thank God.
This is, you'll have to guess. The fundamental weakness of Western civilization is empathy.
Oh, I know who said that. It was Elon Musk.
Yes. Named in 7 words already. The empathy exploit. There, it's exploiting a bug in the empathy response. Empathy has been weaponized. It's a difficult place to be that we're actually in a position of needing to make the case for empathy.
Yeah. I'm pretty strongly pro-empathy.
Is it possible to explain empathy, why empathy matters to someone who does not believe in empathy?
Maybe not. I mean, maybe not, but I feel like I have to keep making the case for it because there are other people who are influenced by that thinking who can be influenced in the other direction. And that's why I feel like I have to keep making the case for empathy. But the case for empathy, to be clear, thank you. The case for empathy, to be clear, is that this is the human superpower. Our superpower is our ability to collaborate together and feel for each other and organize social orders that make space for each other. That is why we are in this room. That is why there are 8 billion of us. That's why we're on every continent right now, is because of our ability to collaborate and cooperate, not our ability to compete and kill each other. Lots of animals are good at competing and killing each other. We are uniquely good, alongside ants, at collaboration. And we build stuff together. And it's really heartbreaking to hear someone say that this is a weakness in the human character when it is our deepest strength.
I think ultimately empathy wins, but we're in a test for which one is supposed to, right? Watching the dismantling of USAID on the basis of saying its work is purely corruption, that it's a money laundering machine, that it can be wiped away and no lives are going to be harmed, and then deny that there are lives actively being harmed, or simply express indifference and mockery of those who are sharing that concern. I suspect some of you here have been fired in the various parts of our government that are being dismantled.
Weird woo. But we see you. It occurs to me, though, that there was no other way for you to say that. You know, like you had to woo. I blame Atul for putting you in that position.
Well, there are so many in this city who did not take their jobs for the money, did not go to work every day for the perks.
The federal workers laugh in unison.
But did it because you felt you could see you were making a difference. And there's lots that we can say that is not ideal about the way we do things, but the combination of security and knowing that you're going to be making a big difference in the world is meaningful for many, many people. And I wonder what you might say in a community where we feel we're fighting for empathy, fighting for the, at the end of the day, none of us who've worked in government are crying the tears for the people in government. We're crying our tears for all who benefited from the work that was done, and all who are hurt and damaged because of what's taken away. And so I wonder, you met with some USAID workers today. What did you see or feel as we're all trying to save now? And I wonder if there's a word of thought about, realistically, it's a long haul we're up against now, right? So
Yeah.
Where do we go?
Well, I mean, mostly I felt enraged. One USAID worker told me about an oxygen who works in oxygen delivery, supplemental oxygen delivery, told me about oxygen machines bought and paid for sitting in ports, doing nothing to help patients. You've seen photographs of TB drugs sitting in warehouses, unable to get to patients. You've seen, I've heard of tests that have already been done, but there's nobody and nothing, no way to tell the patients the results because it all shut down. And so there are people living with tuberculosis who don't know that they have tuberculosis. HIV response, we're seeing babies born needlessly with HIV. The scope of the catastrophe is almost unimaginable. And so the first thing that I feel is disgusted they emphasized to me the loss of trust, that they'd spent a lot of time trying to make the case to their countries and their partner countries that, the United States comes and stays, and the United States is here for the long haul, and the United States is going to be with you and help you transition to a more stable, self-supported version of a strong healthcare system. And then the devastation of having someone else tell you, no, we're not. And having to say that to your implementing partners on your way out the door, it's brutal. It's unbelievably difficult, and my heart breaks for those folks. What I would say is that this feels like the end of the story, and I understand why, because this is the most recent day we've lived through, and because this is an absolutely devastating moment. But this is not the end of the story. This is the middle of the story, and it falls to us to fight for a better end.
I'm going to go to questions from the audience, but I want to read another thing I wrote down that you said that is going to stick with me. I'm prone to despair, and so I know its powerful voice. It just doesn't happen to be true. Here's the truth as I see it. Vicious cycles are common. Injustice and unfairness permeate every aspect of human life, but virtuous cycles are possible. John, you're the most virtuous cycle creator that I have met, and you
Thank you. That's really kind of you to say.
questions. We'll start out with a hard one.
Great.
Hi, John. I tried Dr. Pepper for the first time today.
Then the infectious disease doctors are like, why are they clapping? It's my favorite soda. It's the context.
It was great. It lived up to the hype.
Yes, I love to hear that.
I'm curious, though, is Dr. Pepper somehow tuberculosis?
Of course. Of course.
So is everything tuberculosis? Is Dr. Pepper tuberculosis?
Absolutely. What do you think pharmacist Charles Alderton was doing when he wasn't inventing Dr. Pepper? He was dispensing medicine for tuberculosis. It was 1889. They just figured out that this was infectious, and there were all kinds of serums and drops and drowsies used to treat tuberculosis. None of them worked. And that's a huge part of Charles Alderton's job when he's not sitting at the soda fountain dreaming of how to make Dr. Pepper. So yeah, actually, after that, Charles Alderton went on he was like, I'm done with this Dr. Pepper business. I don't want to run a soda company. What am I selling here? Sugar water? I want to have a proper job. I want to be a chemist. And so he went back and worked for the Waco Chemical Company, which, so there you go. Charles Alderton, 100% distributing medicines for TB.
That was impressive. Hi, I'm a middle school art teacher. This, by the way, from Jen the Hen.
Jen, you are doing the actual Lord's work.
So I'm a middle school art teacher and would love to know the story behind the cover art.
Oh, that's a great question. So the cover art was designed by the same designer of the Anthropocene Reviewed, Grace Hahn. And usually you have this tortuous process of a cover where they send you a cover and you're like, I don't know how to say this politely, but this is the worst thing that's ever happened to me. And I'm insulted and you've hurt my feelings. And then they send you another cover and you're like, this is marginally more acceptable. And you got to kind of go back and forth. And in this case, Grace sent like 3 covers and I was like, I don't know, they're all great. They're all amazing. They're all amazing. What I love about it is that it's a petri dish, it's a tier, it's because it's abstracted, it's so many things at once. And I don't know which one it is supposed to be, but it is all of them. But also, I just love abstract forms. One of my favorite artists is Miyoko Ito, the great Japanese abstract artist. And I felt like it was almost a Miyoko Ito painting. I just loved it so much. And so immediately I was like, it's just a question of colors. And I was like, I don't know, Grace, which one do you like best? And so she just picked her favorite one, and that's the cover. It was very, very easy.
There's a lot of emotional whiplash between the questions here, so we'll just
we'll just run with that.
We'll run with that. Okay. How did you react when Hank told you about his diagnosis, and has it changed your life in any way you didn't expect? P.S. I love you.
Aw, thanks. I would say I love you too, but I don't want to make the parasocial thing too intense. Well, so I actually reacted with tremendous joy when I found out Hank's actual diagnosis. That sounds like a joke, but it's not. Because for 3 weeks before that, so I got back from Sierra Leone in February of 2023. As we were driving, my dad picked us up at the airport, and my dad was like, Hank has a funny lymph node. And then the next day, Hank's funny lymph node was a biopsy. And then 3 days later, Hank's funny lymph node was cancer, but they didn't know what kind of cancer. And there was about a week, maybe 2 weeks, where we didn't know what kind of cancer. It could have been a metastasis from a distant site. It could have been a much more serious form of lymphoma. Could have been all kinds of things, and it was terrifying. It was the most scared I've ever been. I have no idea what it was like to be Hank, but for me, it was the most scared I've ever been. And I'm sure for him, it was just unbelievably terrible because he has a little baby, and he loves his life and loves being here with us, and it was terrifying. And so when we actually found out it was Hodgkin lymphoma, which is a relatively treatable form of cancer, Hank called me, and I was with my parents, and he was like, it's Hodgkin lymphoma. And my poor mother just burst into tears and like sat down on this, we were walking over a bridge, and she just sat down on the bridge and just sobbed. And I'll never forget that moment. And so it was a moment of tremendous relief. But one of the first things Hank said to me was a 93% cure rate if you can access treatment, and 5% cure rate if you can't. So he knew immediately that cancer is also a disease of injustice. And yeah, he's been very fortunate I guess he hasn't been that fortunate. Relatively fortunate to have the kind of cancer that he had and to be doing so well now. And, he's in good shape. His chance of remission is present, but low. And it has changed the way I think about everything. It's a profound reminder that we're only here for a little while, that this whole thing is precarious, and that the only thing that we can say with any certainty is that we have an obligation to each other, which is to try to carry each other through whatever comes, so that nobody has to go through any of that stuff alone. And Hank was very fortunate to have not just me and my parents and his wife and his kid, but also y'all. It's hard for you to know what a difference that made to see those comments flood in when Hank announced his diagnosis. I told him, I was like, man, I don't know if you should say anything. Like, just take 12 weeks off, and like come back with a buzz cut. Like, nobody's gonna care, and like probably people will notice, but like they're not gonna mind, and I'll just say something's up, But he really wanted to talk about it. He saw it as an opportunity to do science education, as he sees everything as an opportunity to do it. So he was like, no, this is cool. I'll talk about like how cancer works. And, we'll talk about, it's just going to change the way we talk about stuff for a while. And that's what it became. But y'all's support mattered a lot. And I don't think anybody ever went through cancer with as much support as Hank did. Thanks to y'all.
Much of your advocacy has emphasized expanding access to existing TB treatments. As an infectious disease researcher myself,
I knew they were in the audience.
I'm curious as to how you understand the role of continued biomedical research on the biology of TB in reducing global healthcare inequalities. This is a tough one.
Yeah, but it's super important, right? Like our tools are so much better than they used to be, and now we have shorter courses of antibiotics so that you can get cured of TB within 4 months, usually, of antibiotics, which is still a lot. And sometimes it's 6 months, sometimes for certain drug-resistant cases, it can be 12 months or longer. So like we still need much better tools. We need better diagnostics. 219,000 kids are gonna die of TB this year, and we don't have a great test for them. We don't have, even Gene Expert isn't a great test for them. We miss most cases in kids with microscopy. We miss a lot with chest x-rays. And so we need better tests for kids. And one of the great intense frustrations that I have, and I know you share this, is that we were pretty far down the line of a lot of different trials to improve treatments and improve diagnostics, including with this amazing test that we think might work, where it's a tongue swab test, like getting tested for strep throat. And that work has been abandoned. I mean, that work is just, there's no other word for it. That work has been just abandoned. And that's absolutely devastating. So biomedical research is hugely important. I'd be curious what you have to say about this, Atul, but my own feeling is that we need much better tools. We need, what we really need is one dose preventative therapy. Right now you have to take a month of antibiotics to make sure you don't get TB. We need one dose, whether it's a shot or a series of pills. That would be a game changer. And we need vaccines.
The trial for exactly that was about to launch when it got stopped. So first part of the trial was a single pill that you take once a week for the month. So 4 pills instead of every day. And then after that test confirmed, Johnson & Johnson has a long-acting form of bedaquiline. So it's single shot injection that potentially could be the single shot preventative therapy. We just now got that for HIV, a 6-month single injection that will prevent HIV or treat HIV. And we were set to roll that out. And I'm hoping that we're still able to roll at least part of that out. And I keep saying we, but I'm not USAID anymore, but it's still, those of you who are, you're still my people. So we will have to recover that work. And if the US isn't going to do it, we'll find ways elsewhere to do it. All right, this one may be a little unfair because I think you gave some words of wisdom on this already, so I'm going to make you...
I've always got more words of wisdom, man.
I work for the National Institutes of Health.
Oh, yay! Thank God.
Do you have words of wisdom or encouragement for those of us working in public health right now and dealing with the devastating cuts from our government? Thank you, Katie.
Thank you for doing that work. I know that it's hard right now. It's really hard right now, but thank you. We got to fight, not just like our well-being depends upon it, but like the well-being of millions of people depend upon it. That's how we have to fight right now. We have to scrap for everything that we can get back. We have to scrap for everything that we can save. We have to reinstitute every contract we can reinstitute when it comes to health and human services. What a great phrase that is, health and human services. What a great phrase the National Institute of Health is. There was a time before we had a National Institute of Health, before we had health and human services in our government. And it was a time when the United States was a poorer and sicker nation than it is today. It's because of public health interventions, because of research, because of publicly funded research that we are where we're at today. I'll give you one example of this. You just mentioned long-acting bedaquiline, which could be a single shot that works as preventative care for TB. That would be absolutely transformational. Well, bedaquiline was funded primarily by public money, mostly by money from us, from taxpayers, mostly by NIH grants. And so that's the reason that we have this incredibly powerful drug to treat drug-resistant tuberculosis. If we didn't have that, we would be in an absolute, unadulterated, unprecedented crisis where we had no tools to deal with hundreds of thousands of cases of TB every year, including TB that's showing up more and more in the United States. And so that drug exists not necessarily because of your work, but because of the work of you and your colleagues. And we are very, very fortunate to live in a world where that drug exists. So what I would ask you to do is to remember that your work has value even when other people are devaluing it.
I want to add a last word on this one, which is just to say, I think the most important thing we can do, and it feels like it's not that much, but it's a lot, and that is to bear witness. Bear witness to the truth of what's going on. Bear witness to the impact that you see. Bear witness to your own work and your own suffering. We don't have enough people who are telling the story of the significance of their work and making it known to, yes, talk to Congress, yes, talk to the courts and make your case in those venues, but above all, talk to the people in your families across the country, among your friends, and make your work and the significance of it known. Washington does not change because it's leading change. Washington changes because they're following the change, and that is going to come from people talking to people. So all of you doing that is really important.
Agreed. Agreed.
I think we've come to the end of our time. I cannot thank you enough, John, for your book and your heart.
Thank you so much, Dr. Atul Gawande, everybody. Okay, I can have this mic. Because I have this mic. Oh, one more time for Dr. Atul Gawande. One of the absolute privileges of my life to share a stage with him and to share this room with you all tonight. Thank you so much. So we're nearing the end of our time together tonight, but I don't blame you if you also feel that we're nearing the end of our time together in a grander sense. That is to say, you may feel, as I sometimes do of late, that the world is a little bit like ending. Societal collapse is in the air, recently noted the theologian Timothy Chalamet. He really said that. How does somebody get to be so pretty and so pithy? We do know the world will end, after all. A while back, my then 9-year-old daughter found out that in about 1 billion years, the sun will become a red giant and almost certainly consume the earth. And that was a real bummer of a day in the Green household. So yeah, I know it will end for each of us, for all of us, for our planet, but not yet, not today. As I mentioned earlier, my friend Henry loves the verbs encourage and discourage. And right now I am very discouraged. I feel that my courage is being dragged down by all sorts of forces, especially by those who argue or act as if some human lives are more valuable than others. How can we respond hopefully to a moment where hope does not feel rewarded or justified? How can we imagine better worlds when so many power structures seem intent upon making worse ones? I mean, one recent estimate holds that the cutting of all US-related tuberculosis funding will result in 3 million more cases of TB in a few years, including a dramatic rise in drug-resistant tuberculosis. And that's just one disease among many, and declining human health is just one issue among many. It's easy to feel that this is the end of history, and I don't blame you if you feel it. There is a dread about our current historical moment, a general feeling that horror is here and worse is coming, and I feel it too. I mean, why are we even here? Just to witness suffering, just to worry? Sometimes I know it feels that way, but I think while we are in this moment of not yet, we are here to be with each other in the deepest sense, to help others feel less alone and to allow others to help us feel less alone. I believe we are here to accompany each other through the joys and travails of humanness, through the wonder and the precarity. And I believe that we are not living at the end of history, but as I said earlier, in the middle of history. My friend Amy Cross Rosenthal, who died of cancer a few years ago, knew this better than anyone I've ever met. Amy used to ask people to sing an old song from World War I, sung to the tune of the New Year's Eve song, Auld Lang Syne. British soldiers in the trenches, horrified by the pointlessness of war, would sing, "We're here because we're here because we're here." Aww. And Amy changed the meaning of that song without ever changing the words to it. She turned it into a kind of battle cry for hope. It's true that we can't say with certainty why we're here, but we can nonetheless celebrate being here, especially in community, because that song, when sung together, takes on an entirely different meaning, at least for me. So if you'll indulge me, I'd like to invite Atul back out to sing it with me and with all of you once now. We're here because we're here, because we're here. We're here because we're here, because we're here, because we're here. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight. Thank you so much. Thank you, Washington. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Yes, I cried.